So I was hoping, and I love this stuff, so sorry if I get a little excited, because there's a really good chance that I will get excited. All right? So, cool, thanks guys. Again, this is the Battle of Pliska, and it is going to pit the Byzantine Empire against the Bulgars. And what's really cool about this whole thing is that we already know a little bit about the Romans, and so this is just a later version of the Romans. We don't know anything about the Bulgars. We just haven't ever talked about them yet. But what's really neat about all of this is to see how a regional superpower, really a world superpower, the Byzantine Empire, is going to come up against a lesser powered Bulgar army, and spoiler alert, the Byzantines are going to lose, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So, the Byzantines are going to be led by a guy named Nikephoros I, and he's going to come to power after a palace coup. He's going to oust a female leader who was called Irene. He takes over from her, and he takes over in the year 802 AD. And you know that Rome fell in 476, so that is the western part of the empire. So the eastern part is going to keep going. So Nikephoros takes power. He has some issues, like I mentioned, to the south. And there's also some competition in Europe itself with Charlemagne. To the north, there's going to be a group of people called the Bulgars. And what's going to happen is Nikephoros is going to attempt to gain influence over some of his northern territories, particularly going in through Greece. And as he moves his powerful army into Greece, he just consolidates his power, and he's able to gain more and more influence, tax money, and a larger army. Because when you take over land area, you get to exact troop, like the word I'm looking for is when someone gives you something. This is my traumatic brain injury kicking in, which I am going to have to eliminate. I'll leave it. Never will feel sorry for me. What happens is you actually force another person to give you soldiers, kind of like a tax. And so that's what happens. And thank you for rolling with this. But what's going to happen while the Byzantines are expanding their empire? The Bulgars are going to expand their empire also. And they're going to be led by a guy who came into power right around the same time, within a couple of years. And he has the cool name Krum. And so he was called Khan Krum. And Krum is going to work with Charlemagne in order to consolidate. One's going to come in from the west, and Krum is going to come in from the east, and they're going to work together to form their own boundary. And so they're going to take over lesser peoples. And so it's kind of fascinating that this happens, but it gives a lot of power to Khan Krum. And what this is going to do is it's going to be seen as a threat to the Byzantine Empire. So the Byzantines are going to watch what's happening in the north with fear, but the problem is they also have problems in the south. And so Nikephoros is afraid to do too much going either one direction or another, because if he goes north, he could be attacked in the south. If he goes south, he could be attacked in the north. And then there's always palace intrigue. And so he's going to be worried that there might possibly be a threat to his rule. Someone might step up and try to take over from him. So what's going to happen is eventually there's going to be an issue in the south. And the south is actually going to be placated for a little bit. What that means is the southern front of the Byzantines appears to be okay. And so what that means is Nikephoros can emphasize what's going on in the north. And so what he's going to decide to do is he is going to decide that he's going to march north into Bulgar territory so that he can take their capital, which is Pliska, and he's going to deal Crum's army a massive defeat. Then he never has to worry about his northern borders again. Sounds great. So what Nikephoros does is he amasses a huge army. He also brings along with him all of the important people, including his brother Stavrakios, and many of his nobles who he didn't 100% trust. He was afraid if he left and went north with the army, someone might try to overthrow him. So he's going to bring a whole bunch of super important Byzantines with him to keep his eyes on them. And they're going to head north to head into Bulgar territory to take over. Well, immediately Khan Krum says, whoa, and he sends peace emissaries to the Byzantines. And the Byzantines will have none of it. They're like, no, we're really pretty powerful. You can't touch us. And so we're going to continue on. And so they paid no attention to the peace overtures. Also, Krum himself had taken over some Byzantine cities and had sacked them. And back then, when you sacked a city, you often killed the combatants. Sometimes you killed the civilians, or you sold them into slavery. So the Byzantines, not happy with Krum. Krum, a little bit afraid of the Byzantines, which is understandable. So what happens is a massive army is going to march toward Pliska. Let me tell you a little bit about this army. You guys have already seen pictures of what they look like, but the Byzantines had about 80,000 total men. 80,000. That's huge. And you have Nikephoros I and his brother are leading. They are primarily using cavalry. In this case, it's guys on horses. The men themselves are wearing armor. The horses are armored. And they're primarily armed with a spear. And they use this spear not for throwing, but for charging their heavy cavalry and stabbing them with the spear. And the personal bodyguard of the emperor himself, they were called the Tagbata. So what you have is highly trained cavalry soldiers that are really, really scary. And in open fields, these are tanks. They're going to mow you down. So they're really, 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 really effective. And so that was the bulk of the army that Nikephoros is going to have. He's going to have a massive cavalry element. Yes, he's also going to have infantry with him as well. Infantry is great at holding territory, and they're really good at, if you take a city, they're the ones that are going to stay in the city and occupy it for you. They help protect you, but it's really those horses that were the most important part of the Byzantine army. Up against the Bulgars, initially, Khan Krum is only going to have maybe 10,000 men, which is not a large number. We're not 100% sure. And just so you guys know, I'm going on multiple different sources and none of them agree. And so it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what's happening, so I've tried to make it as simple as possible for you guys, because we're all new to this. So, Khan Krum is going to have cavalry. They're very similar to the Byzantine cavalry, and he's going to have infantry very similar to the Byzantine infantry, just dramatically fewer of them at the start. So what's going to happen is you're going to have Nikephoros I is going to travel all the way up to Pliska, and Khan Krum is going to see this. He's like, I can't possibly meet the Byzantine army in an open field. His cavalry will run right over me. And so Khan Krum leaves. He leaves his capital. He does leave some soldiers in Pliska. It might be up to 6,000 of them to man the city and hold as long as they can, because really what Khan Krum wants to do is he wants to make sure that eventually he can get backup, because his army's tiny right now, but there's a whole bunch of potential allies. There's Slavs, there's Avyars, there's a whole bunch of people that will come to his aid. It's just going to take him a while to get there. And so the longer that it takes the Byzantines to march and fight, the better chance Khan Krum has of having a larger army. So it's all about a waiting game. Well, what happens is the Byzantines, they're going to take the city of Pliska. Not only are they going to take the city of Pliska, they're going to put the entire garrisoned force of the enemy to the sword. That means they killed all of them. Then they either killed or enslaved all of the adults living in Pliska. And then what they did with the children and babies is they tied them to the ground and crushed their heads with millstones. A millstone is like a round stone, and apparently it was great fun to crush babies' heads with it. That's just what they did. This is terrorism. You do this, and I'm not advocating this at all, obviously, but the reason you do something horrible like this is the next city that you approach with a massive army, what are they going to do if they're an enemy city? Will they fight? No, exactly. What are they going to do?
Give up.
They're going to give up. Of course they will. And the idea is, if you give up, what are you going to do to the civilians, guys? What do you do to the civilians if they give up?
Kill them.
Oh, you don't have to. Think about that. If I'm an enemy city, I see a huge army, and I fight, and I know if I fight, I die. What happens if I surrender? There's a chance that exactly, there's a chance that I may not die. And so that's why Nikephoros did this. All right, again, not a nice thing, but it made practical sense at the time. However, it's going to create anger amongst all of the potential allies of Khan Krum. If Nikephoros can come in and do this to Pliska, he could go anywhere. He could do this to your child. And so it's going to cause anger, and it's going to cause the people, instead of giving up, it's going to make the Bulgars rise up. And so it's going to work against the Byzantines. So here's what happens. The capital is taken. Krum's army's gone. And so Nikephoros and his people plunder the city. They loot the city. They take their time. And a lot of the soldiers, the Byzantine soldiers, are like, my pockets are full of gold. I want to go home. I don't want to be here. And so they started to kind of get frustrated. And they're like, okay, why don't we just go home? We've won the war. Nikephoros realized they hadn't won the war. In order to win the war, you have to defeat the enemy's army. And Khan Krum's army is still somewhere. Nikephoros has no idea where it's at. What Khan Krum has done is he's taken his soldiers and he's hiding in the mountains. He knows the mountains. He knows exactly where to go. Now, Khan Krum sends emissaries, peace emissaries, to the Byzantines and says, hey, take what you've got and just leave and we won't bother you. And Nikephoros says, no, we're winning. Why would we leave? Well, there's a darn good reason to leave. Number one, you don't know where the enemy army is. Number two, your soldiers are getting a little bit frustrated. All right? And the other reason is, and no one knows this, what's happening to the size of Krum's army? Right?
It's getting bigger.
Why is it getting bigger?
Because he asked for help from the other places.
Because he asked for help from his allies, and they're starting to show up in the mountains. And what happens, Nikephoros' army is actually getting smaller. Because you've got people who are deserting. You've got people who are like, I got my stuff, I'm going home. You know, they don't care. They're fighting for money. The Bulgars are fighting for their homeland. It's a different thing. So they have more motivation to fight. So here's what happens. Nikephoros fears that he's been away from home too long. There might be some palace intrigue. He might possibly lose his role as emperor. And so he decides he's going to quickly march south just to either come into contact with Krum's army and maybe defeat them, because he'll defeat them because he's amazing. Right? He knows this. How could you possibly stand up to him? Or at least he'll go back, make sure everything's cool at home, and then he can launch another successful invasion. He's got all the time in the world because he has a massive army. So he's not worried. As a matter of fact, he is so not worried that as he is traveling south, he doesn't even send out a vanguard, or he doesn't send out scouts. He doesn't put his cavalry out in front of him to scout the area to see where the enemy is. He's full of hubris. And you know hubris because of who? Odysseus, absolutely. So, what's going to happen is he's going to blunder his way through the mountains that he's never seen before, looking for an enemy that he really can't find, and then decide, well, we'll just go home because we've already had a great victory and everything's going to be fine. Well, that's not the case, because what happens is Khan Krum knows the territory. He knows exactly where Nikephoros is going to have to go through, and it's a pass that's called the Verbitsa Pass. And he has to go through it considering the direction that he's traveling. And that's going to put him through this area, down this road, and these are pretty steep mountains. They're not cliffs, but it's steep mountains. And if you're on the top of them, no one down here can see you. You're in the low ground in a valley. There's a road that goes through here, and there are bridges that cross water. But the problem is, Nikephoros doesn't really know this. He's just kind of moving forward. Yeah, he has his cavalry in the front, but he's not allowing them to scout far enough ahead. Plus, Krum knows that if he's on these sides, nobody can see him. So what Khan Krum and the Bulgars do is they set up a beautiful ambush. And you have infantry up here, hidden to the north. You have infantry over here, and what they spend their time doing is building palisades, or basically walls of sticks and logs. And it's also super marshy over here. And that's because Khan Krum didn't have large numbers of people. So he said, I won't defend this area because I don't have enough troops, but I will make it difficult to get through there. Right? It's marshy and there's pointed sticks. All right. And what he does is he puts most of his soldiers up here on the top of a mountain where the spies can look down and they can watch the Byzantines. And the Byzantines, because of, that is not for us, the Byzantines, because they are in a valley, they're forced to spread out in a long line. The Bulgars are more condensed. They're going to spring a trap. Unfortunately, what Nikephoros does is he strings everybody out, and eventually he comes across a wall here. It's a palisade, and it's blocking their movement to continue toward home. They come across that, they're like, oh my, what do we do? These guys, the cavalry, turn around to tell Nikephoros, hey, they blocked this area in front of us. Let's check behind us. So they rush back here and check behind, and what they realize is that this area here has now also been blocked. What has Khan Krum done? Yeah, he's got him in a trap. He also has them in a situation where, oh, watch this. I know. He's on the side here. This side is defended basically with sticks and marshes, but then there's a wall here, there's a river here, and that way they can't escape because it's been blocked. And here's the deal. No worries. Because honestly, Nikephoros thinks, oh, this is something that's been there for a while to block someone traveling this way. No worries. But when they noticed that that was blocked, then they realized that it was put there for a purpose, to trap them. And here's where the real problem occurs. This is when Nikephoros shows how bad of a military commander he is. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do at this point. If you're Nikephoros and your army is here, you're blocked here, and you're blocked here, where do you think the enemy is? You really can't see them effectively. Yeah, you're going to know they're up here, right? Well done. So you've got a good idea that you're surrounded. what should Nikephoros do? He's got a powerful army. What should he do? What do you think? Just throw an idea out. Use his army to do what?
To like go towards the sides.
Could you possibly go to the side? It's a possibility.
Difficult, but yes.
It would be difficult. If you go here, you're going into territory you're not certain about. It looks kind of swampy. If you go here, you're going up a hill, which is not normally a tactic that you want to do if the enemy is at the top of the hill, because they have an advantage attacking you. I've got the high ground. You get the idea. All right? Yeah.
Can they knock down the wall?
Yes. That's 100% what Nikephoros should have done. Either wall. Because you take all of your soldiers and you hit that wall, and no one's going to be able to stop you.
The wall just like stick?
It's wood. It's a wooden wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that like damage their weapons though?
Well, here's the thing. What you would do with something like that is if it's defended, you have to try to kill the defenders. You could try to go around it. Or burn it down. It's wood. See what I'm saying? So that's a possibility. Either one. The smartest one would be that one because you've already been there. Yeah, because you've been there and it was recently built. Well done. So it can't be terribly well created. But Nikephoros, against the best wishes of his strategos, well, strategoi, all of his generals said, attack now or we're gonna get stuck. Instead, Nikephoros breaks his groups into either 3 or 4 groups. He sticks himself in the middle with his tagmata, and they set up camp. They sit there. You have cavalry here, infantry back there, and they don't quite know what to do because they don't have any orders. That is, just so you know, a huge mistake to do that. And Nikephoros was heard to say to his brother this quote, "Even if we had wings, we could not escape." Even if we had wings, we could not escape. And so Stavrakios says, hold on, we have to attack. And apparently, those are brothers, they almost came to blows. Younger brother wanted to fight his way out. Older brother just wanted to sit there and vacillate, to dilly-dally. So they sit there for 3 days. What that allows is more and more allies to show up. Remember, Khan Krum wants time. Well, he got it. And he ends up having an army of about 60,000 men. He went from somewhere around 10,000 to 60,000. Now, 60,000 versus 80,000 still sucks. But because you're in close confines, the cavalry is not as effective. And because the Bulgars have the high ground, they have an advantage. And then what Khan Krum does, which is genius, is he starts to play a little bit of psychological warfare. He has his guys up here bang on their shields all night long, just freaking out the Byzantines and yelling at them and threatening them and telling them what they're going to do to them when they kill them. And over the course of a while, you start to freak out, and individual soldiers try to run away. And this is going to hurt discipline. The Byzantines are freaking out. They're like, how come our commander isn't telling us what to do? We don't know what to do. And the enemy's obviously right there because they're making a ton of noise. You could still win this battle if the Byzantines did exactly what you said. Just mass your forces, attack one point. But he broke his forces up. He divided his forces in the face of an enemy, which you usually don't want to do. And then he gave the advantage to the Bulgars. He just sat there. Eventually, Khan Krum is going to say, well, I think I'd like to win this battle now. And what he's going to do is, at about 4 a.m. in the morning, after keeping these guys awake, and eventually what happens is the guys that are in their camps, they've got comfortable tents, and a soldier doesn't like to sleep in their armor. So they remove their armor. So they've taken off their armor, they're sleeping, these guys haven't been. All right? They're ready to fight. What happens is this, and this is a genius move. All of these guys are consolidated together. It's a mixture of cavalry and infantry, led by Krum himself. And where do they attack? Because they're going to attack at 4 in the morning. Where would you attack?
Up top.
Okay, you could attack up top, you could hit the infantry. You could certainly do that. The fear is then that the cavalry can come to the aid. That's a possibility. If you attack the cavalry, you could wipe out the cavalry here, but then you've got this cavalry to deal with, and they're the best on the battlefield. And then you still have this infantry.
Yeah, that's what I meant. By infantry.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, okay, cool. You can go against the infantry up top. Got it. Okay, I hear you. Yeah,
You go for the generals that don't have anybody to lead them.
kill the general. That's what he decides to do. Right? Now, could any of those other things have worked? Absolutely. But this ended up being a smart move. So what happens is all of these forces rush down a hill, giving an advantage. A horse running down a hill is going really fast. Right? A lot of inertia. And they hit this group. What's interesting is this group, they're not ready. They hear the attack occurring. You can hear the galloping horses. They start to put on their armor. They're not ready. They grab their weapons. They go to jump on their horses. Horses don't like to have armor on at all times. So they're trying to put armor on their horses. They're trying to put their armor on. They're trying to get their weapons. They're trying to mount up. And all of the king's bodyguard is just annihilated almost immediately. So this group ceases to be an effective fighting force, and they were the best of the best. And so now what you have is this whole group right here, right, instead of being there, there's this massive group right here. And then someone kills Nikephoros. He's killed. The leadership is gone. His brother takes over, but he's horrifically wounded in the neck. And he's eventually taken off the battlefield. And he's going to survive 6 months. That's not a long time. What happens is, now you have a massive Bulgar army here. You have cavalry here and infantry here. Half of them go here, half of them go here. They're well led. What is this cavalry going to do? There's a couple things they could do, right? What they should do is turn to face the enemy. They don't have effective leadership. Also, what they're seeing is their comrades, their greatest warriors, wounded, streaming past them, running for their lives. That is going to destroy morale. So these guys freak out. They're like, they defeated the best of our cavalry. What chance do I have? I'm just a regular guy on a horse. They've got all the armor. So these guys then tried to run into this wall. They're on horses. So what do guys on horses do when there's a really tall wall? What, they could try to go around. They did. It didn't work. They got off their horses. They tried to climb the wall. And those that did jumped over the wall. You could jump over the wall. But what they didn't realize was the Bulgars had built a huge pit down here with spikes in it. They had a lot of time. And so all these guys who jumped here jumped into spikes. They attempted to burn this down. And the fire itself caught this whole area on fire and started to injure wounded Byzantines that couldn't crawl out of the way. It was a horrific failure. Those that were able to get across and made it through the pits then were stuck at this river, and most of them drowned in the river. They just couldn't get away. All of these guys, almost to a man, died. All of the guard died. Now you've got this infantry group up here all alone. They're going to be annihilated. Some will attempt to escape. Enough people escaped in order to kind of tell the story. But that's about the extent of it. And so what happens is you get Khan Krum wins the battle. And he's looking over the battlefield and he sees the body of Nikephoros. And he has the body of the extremely dead body of Nikephoros brought to him, and he cuts off the head, sticks it on a spike. Then eventually he has the skull itself cleaned up, covered in silver, tipped over and turned into a drinking chalice. And from then on, Khan Krum drank out of that chalice. And anytime he met with any foreign dignitaries, he forced them to drink out of the skull of Nikephoros, which is actually a little bit funny. And for the next 150 years, the Byzantines aren't even going to attempt to go north. That's a long time, 150 years. What is also kind of funny is apparently, as Khan Krum supposedly took his axe to chop off the head of Nikephoros, he said, "If you don't want my pax, you get my axe." Now, pax means peace in Latin. So if you don't want my peace, then I'm going to kill you. Now, in Bulgarian, does that rhyme and sound epically cool like that? I don't care. That is like a really super cool thing to say. Hey, you don't want my pax? You get my axe. So it's kind of funny. But the end result is the northern border of the Byzantine Empire is not going to go into Bulgaria because of the mistakes of Nikephoros. We don't even know how many of the Byzantines died. We know probably most of 80,000, because we're not sure. We also have no idea how many Bulgars died. Nowhere near that number. We just don't have those records. And the only paintings we have are 400 years later.
Hello, Falcons. It's that time of year for the Grove's annual Tower Buff Volleyball Tournament.
Thanks, guys.
This